good news. So this is a way that you guys on your attendance quiz, only 100 of you participated on Monday. In terms of getting credit for attendance, and so 50% of you said the Constitution as the most important step, which tells me that maybe I've done a better job of talking about the Constitution this semester. Maybe also the people are just in the first one, so they move on. And I do want you to think about it. I never had the Constitution win. The Civil War, 25%, the 14th Amendment and incorporation, 13%, the New Deal, 8%, and modern civil rights is 8%. So, there's not really. So we're going to talk about civil liberties today. And the important thing about civil liberties is this, right? We were talking about how the federal government establishes power. One of the things that I want you to know about civil liberties, even when the government, whether it be the federal government, the state government, the local county government, your school district. Okay, these are limits on government. So if I, in a very low way, of the local newspaper, and they refuse to print my abrogated speech, they're not a speech. Right? So if Twitter blocks me and Facebook takes me off, and TikTok says no more talking to you, then they can do that. Right? So media companies are not owned, and therefore they can censor as they choose. All right? This is not a violation of freedom of speech in any way, shape, or form. If your content is not fitting the rules of a particular place, and you get banned. Civil liberties are the personal rights and freedoms of the federal government, the state government, the local government, the county government cannot abridge either by law, constitution, or judicial interpretation. And so that also means that maybe there's a possibility that we have civil liberties that are not enshrined in the Constitution, right? That we have civil liberties that are not enumerated and that are not protected, or judicial interpretation maybe abrogates, and that does not mean, right, that those do not exist. It means the government is acting outside and in violation of our civil liberties. So let's talk about the Bill of Rights. We know, because you guys have read extensively the anti-federalist, federalist debates, and we know all about it, that a giant compromise was that we would have a Bill of Rights in the federal Constitution. This is because states have bills of rights, they thought the federal government would infringe upon that. We also know, right, that the first through 8 are those that give specific rights and liberties. But we haven't really talked about the 9th or the 10th. So the 9th says, hey, so we've listed a bunch of things that are civil liberties. And these are, you guys don't have to remember this, but in the future, when you take your constitutional law classes, it might be helpful, okay? These are negative rights, okay? That means the government can't do something. There's a real debate. Are there also civil liberties that are positive rights, right? Are there also things that the government should do, right? And so we kind of talked about that a little bit, things like justice, right? Things like providing for the general welfare, that's pretty amorphous. But other things too, does that include shelter? Right? And that's not here, but the Ninth Amendment says really clearly, you list some stuff here, but that's not it. We recognize that these aren't all the civil liberties there are, okay? The 10th Amendment says, if we did not give power to the federal government, specifically in the Constitution, then those powers are reserved to the states and the people respectively. Okay? States first, people second. Right? And so this is significant. This is significant because it says if the federal government doesn't have that power. And so there are things where the federal government didn't have power. So we have early court cases where the Supreme Court says, oh, you know, this protected liberties that only applies to the federal government, so you can't apply the Fifth Amendment takings clause to the state of Maryland, for example. Okay? But then the 14th Amendment is passed, giving the federal government more specific powers. The 13th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 12th Amendment, the 17th Amendment, all of these give the government more specific powers. When the states, because they have a role in this, ratify those amendments, then they are agreeing that this is now a federal government power. Okay? So when you talk about, there's a lot of discussion about what's a state right versus a federal right, and people tend to like focus on the Constitution, the body of the Constitution itself. Well, those amendments change the document, right? Whenever slavery is outlawed in the 13th Amendment, that means the 2/3 or the 3/5 compromise no longer exists, right? It's been amended. That's no longer a thing that exists. Okay, so amendments change the document itself. How many of you have a will, a last will and testament? One. Okay. Have you ever made a codicil to that will? A change to the will? So it is evidence. Okay, so you did a whole new. So, but one thing you can do, for example, my grandparents had a trust. They named their son as the executor. He said, I don't want to do this. So they added a codicil, which I drafted because I'm a lawyer. So once you become a lawyer, you're forced to work free for your family. This is true. That's absolutely true. If you're a doctor, thank you, right? Veterinarian, whatever. Okay. I drafted a codicil that named my mother as the executor. Okay. That changed that provision in the trust. It was signed by them, it was witnessed by 2 people, it was notarized, all official. And so no longer could my uncle say, hey, because I was named in the original document, then I'm still the trustee. Okay? My mother was the trustee. They did not have any fights, there were no problems until my grandparents died. That's a good thing. But my point is that when you amend something, you change it. Okay? You change it. All right? So, that's an important thing to remember there. Today, we're only going to talk about the First Amendment because there's a lot, right? There are 6 distinct civil liberties that are protected in the First Amendment. And so, if we look at this, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, meaning that Congress cannot make laws in regard to religion. The federal government, and with incorporation, the 14th Amendment saying, hey, all the rights of the people that are guaranteed by the Constitution, at a federal level, the state also cannot infringe upon that. States cannot, okay, make laws in regard to religion, either helping them, right, aiding them, establishing them, giving them power, giving them money, or taking power away, right, denying them, banning them, all of those things. Okay. The second is, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, right? So the federal government, the state government, the local government cannot aid or inhibit a religion, but they also can't keep people from freely exercising their religion. Yes.
What happens if that religion then violates another right, like say the religion is practicing something?
So for example, human sacrifice. Then that is going to trump it. So the key here is this. None of these are absolute. None of them are absolute, right? And so we'll talk about that, for example, when it talks about endangering minors, then the federal government, the Supreme Court has said, you know, the thing is, we had a state interest in protecting minors. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Congress cannot abridge the freedom of speech or of the press. Or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So, 6. Woo! Let's start with drafting the First Amendment. So, as you know, Madison and Jefferson are responsible for this Bill of Rights as a whole. And Jefferson, when he talks about what he sees the Establishment Clause as meaning, he writes very clearly to the Danbury Baptist Association, because the Baptists were, you know, the majority of power, had a tremendous amount of power, right? No, they didn't, right? They were at a disadvantage in those states. They were at a disadvantage in Great Britain. So when he wrote it, he said, there should be a wall of separation between church and state. And Jefferson had reasons for this. The reason Jefferson had for this was that he saw that political power, those in political power, governmental power, often used religion as a tool to oppress the people and commit atrocities in the name of religion. Can you guys think of any historical times when governments have used religion as a way to further their goals that maybe oppress people? The Crusades, perfect example, right? The Spanish Inquisition, right? All of these things. And so Jefferson was really worried about this. I mean, you know, you can look at Machiavelli when he's writing The Prince, and he says, hey, a prince will use religion because it's a great way to get the masses to do what you want. It's a tool. Use it against them. Okay?
Still works.
So Jefferson's concerned, right? He says, the problem is if those in political power use religion, then they will use it to oppress. Okay? But Madison and Jefferson, to be fair to, is a deist. Many of the founders are deists. He's not a Christian. He believes there's a creator. He thinks there's a higher being, Syria, maybe more, right? But you know, he's like, you know, I don't think they have much to do with what we're doing down here right now. Okay, that's Jefferson's position. Madison is a devout Christian. And Madison agrees with Jefferson on this. But Madison agrees for both the reasons that Jefferson puts out, but for other reasons too. He sees political power as a way to corrupt religion itself. If religions are entwined with political power, seeking political power, then they become corrupt. Religion itself becomes corrupt. Faith itself becomes corrupt. And this is what Madison saw as a true threat to individual freedom and religion. So, a wall of separation. Now, that said, We've never really had a wall separate. They both may have wanted that, but the way that the courts have interpreted the Establishment Clause is more of an accommodationist position, right? Because they see the Establishment Clause and the free exercise thereof kind of, and the truth is, sometimes very clearly conflicting with one another. As you asked, what if these things conflict, right? It's a perfect example. And so the limit test was an accommodationist case, or is a case, and the test that is applied in the case, person, is one that the courts come up with that's accommodationist, but draws some pretty clear lines, right? At this point, we go into the area of establishment or religion, right? And so that's why they created the limit test. And so the limit test says, first of all, and this is actually, I'm reading backwards from what that says, because that's not the way I think of the limit test, that any government act must be secular in its intent outcome, right? Now, it does not have to be only secular, but it has to have a secular purpose. So what is secular anyway? Not religious, right? So any act, it's really clear, right? A non-religious purpose. So for example, if I were to say, hey, look, I'm on city council in Norman, and I'm proposing that we have a Christmas parade this year. And the city council says, yes, let's have a Christmas parade. And Norman has a Christmas parade. Can Norman have a Christmas parade?
Yes.
Why? Okay, number one, people celebrate Christmas who are not religious. Okay, that's number one. Number two, there's another purpose, a couple more purposes behind parades. What are some of these purposes?
Economic, like, a lot of people go downtown and spend money.
That's the big one, right? It's economic. People go downtown and they spend money, right? All of the stores stay open. That's whenever you're downtown in a small town, for example, might announce the Christmas hours are beginning now, right? And so Macy's sponsors a parade for a reason, okay? It's to make money. So that's a very secular purpose, okay? And then the third part of it is just this idea of we have celebrations because it's for the purpose of community, cohesiveness, morale, generally. Okay, very reasonable for a parade.
But we didn't do it for non-Christian.
But the second part of this, and it's the second there as well as my list, is this. This act can also neither inhibit, okay, nor can it advance a particular religion. So, my Christmas parade example, okay, that means that my church, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, if I ask to have a float, the city of Norman cannot say, no, you don't celebrate Christmas, and you can't have a float in the Christmas parade. Okay? That means that I can celebrate it with the raiments of my religion, which include a colander and a terrific amount of weed. Okay? And I can do that. Okay? I can sing the songs of my religion. Okay? But that also means that the Catholic Church choir can sing really religious Christmas songs. It cannot be inhibited. It also means that the Shriners can ride their little, do they still do the little mini bikes?
Yes.
Mini bikes, that's a thing. They can ride their Shriner mini bikes, and for no reason at all. It's not religious at all. Okay? If I can neither inhibit nor advance a particular religion. Anybody who wants to be in the parade can be in the parade. I can put limits. Like, no shooting into the crowd, for example. No giving away of your media, for example. Okay, so, what?
No candies under a certain size.
No candies under a certain size, nothing that will choke the birds, all of those things, okay? I can put restrictive, but they can't be something that would inhibit or advance a particular religion. The third bit is about excessive entanglement. That also means that I can't say to the Catholic Church, for example, hey, I need a list of all the songs we're gonna sing before you sing them. Right? That also means that I can't ask for people to show me the literature that they're gonna hand out before they hand it out. Okay? All right, so those are things I can't do. So in the Fleming case, what was happening was this, it was 1971, and in the late 1960s, many states passed policies where they gave money directly to private schools or provided vouchers to people who wanted to attend private schools. Why would they do that? What was the secular purpose behind it? And
They wanted votes.
what? Okay, better educating system. So we're gonna help support all schools in this way. We give money to public schools. You wanna send your kid to a private school, we wanna support you in doing that, so we're gonna give you a voucher so you can go to the school. Okay, all right, a secular purpose. Just so you know, there's some other things going on here. For example, these private schools are gonna spring up because of desegregation, so that white students have a place to go that is not a public school where they will be in an integrated classroom. So that's happening. But when we talk about advancing or inhibiting a particular religion, if you give money to students to attend religious schools, are you advancing that religion? Okay. Now you can say, hey, but that money can only be used to go toward math books, right? We're gonna buy textbooks with that money, right? And so nuns aren't gonna teach your class. Nobody's gonna tell you that you're going to go to hell because you don't get fractions. Right? Okay, possibly, but how do we know that? Well, then we have to send somebody from the government into your private school to make sure. And we need to audit your books in this private religious school. And so the Supreme Court says there's a third thing. There cannot be that excessive entanglement with religion. In other words, we're also not going to allow government officials to audit the books of private religious schools. Or sit in classes and make sure they're not being indoctrinated in a religion using state money. You can't do that. So even if you can make the argument that this is not advancing a particular religion, there's still that problem. We would still have to check. And if we did, that would be a real problem with the Establishment Clause. That's it. In 1980, the limit test was used to invalidate a Kentucky law that required that every public school classroom have a copy of the Ten Commandments. Right? On the wall, posted. And the Kentucky position was, hey, look, this is the moral code. This has nothing to do with religion. To which the Supreme Court snarkily replied, I like it when there's a little snark and they Supreme Court thing. Have you not read it? Did you not read it? You're saying this is a moral code that has nothing to do with religion, it's just an example of laws. Did you read it? What's the first commandment? And are you what God first?
That should be
Thou
no.
shalt have no other gods before me. That's pretty straight up religion. Okay, there are other things in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife. Thou shalt honor your mother and father, so your days be long upon the earth. Thou shalt not lie. Right? So the question is, we can find that in the law of the United States or any states. Right? In 2005, we see a similar case. We see that in a couple of places, both Alabama and Kentucky, we have one Supreme Justice who kind of in the dead of night has established a marble pliant to the Ten Commandments, put a monument, put right in the front or in the front rotunda, one in one and one in the other, of the Supreme Court building. And they said, that's just an example of law, and look, over on the wall, they would have the code of Hammurabi, so it's equal. And I said, no, it's not. No, it's not your intent. Clearly not your intent. This isn't the law of the state. How can people come before you and believe that they will receive equal treatment if you're putting forth your religious belief? At the same time, there's a case involving the Texas State Capitol grounds. And the Texas State Capitol, have anybody been there? The Texas State Capitol grounds in Austin? Okay, so Ron, tell me about it. I went there on class with Texas. Okay. Yes, I was like in fifth grade. What did it look like? Do you remember? It's big is part of it. Okay. Anybody else? You went down south by southwest. That's how I see it. Right. So south by southwest, you were there, right? What did you see? Okay, so that's the Capitol itself. The rest is the Capitol ground, but it's a giant park. Okay. Throughout this park are dotted a number of monuments. One is in Houston. One has a Spanish Constitution on it. And one in the 1960s is a monument that lists the Ten Commandments. Supreme Court, and it's close to the Supreme Court, says, you know, the thing is what we're seeing here on the state capitol grounds in Texas is this is the history of the people. And so this is a historical monument. It's not something that's right in front of a legislature. It's not something that's right in front of a courthouse. It's out, yeah, or inside the courthouse, right? It's outside, and there are lots of things around it, and it's a symbol that goes along with these other symbols of Texas history. And so we're going to say, you know, that goes into that freedom of expression or exercise. Yeah, fair.
I can't remember, but they were trying to put that Satanist statue at the Oklahoma Capitol. What were their grounds on that?
Well, in Oklahoma, so after this decision is made, someone donates a similar Ten Commandment monument to the Oklahoma State Legislature, puts it right outside the big steps outside the Capitol. You know, the Oklahoma State Capitol. They put it right outside the steps. And there's some other things there. They're like, hey, there are other things here. There's a oil there. We all know that that's the God we all worship in Oklahoma. So that's fine, right? I'm assuming, right? On square. But the other part is, you know, and there are other, you know, there are statues to symbolize our Native American past,
Oil.
and the land, right? To respect the land. And so this is part of that. That did not go to the Supreme Court of the United States. And it did not go to the Supreme Court of the United States because Oklahoma has it most. And in the Oklahoma Constitution, it very specifically says that state funds and state property cannot be used for religious purposes. It is explicit. And so by putting it on state property, they were saying, well, you know, I think some big stuff here. And so the Satanist church did develop a statute. They said, well, they can have that, we can have this. But the Supreme Court said, no, you can have it anyway, but, I think at the same time it was happening, like, before it was removed, or before the decision came down, it was, around the same time, somebody had a car accident and accidentally ran over it and took it out, you know. So, here's the thing that happened. So, that was 2005. However, in 2022, so 50 years after voting, we see a dramatic reverse of this, right? See a dramatic change. The first is in Carson versus Macon in 2022, when the state of Maine was giving funds and they said, hey, look, I'm sorry, you're a private religious school, so you do not qualify for this grant money. The Supreme Court said, if you're giving grant money to anybody, you have to give it to everybody. That includes participants. Maine, kind of in anticipation of this, had said that in order to receive the funds, you had to accept people all sexual preference and orientation, and so nobody took the money. But that's a reversal. But the biggest reversal, I think, is what we see in Kennedy versus Bremerton, where they almost explicitly overruled it. It comes really close. The concurrence does overturn it. In which they say that it's okay for a high school football coach after a game on the 50-yard line to engage in public prayer during the time of their duties with their players, the public, and invite the opposing team to do so. So that's where we are today. The First Amendment also talks about free exercise, right? And this brings up, you know, what if, right? What if there is a another reason, you know, there's what if there's something that can outweigh that, like necessity, right, for the protection of minors? And we see 3 examples of this. And again, I want to remind you that no civil liberty is absolute. Okay, that means that the Second Amendment is not absolute. The freedom of speech is not absolute. And so this is an example of that. If you are 15 years old and have a sincerely held religious belief that you should not receive a transfusion of blood or extreme medical measures should not be taken to extend your life, and your parents say, no, you can't do that, we're not going to give permission. The Supreme Court has said that the state's duty to minors overrules the parents and the child's religious belief at that time because they are a child. Okay? When you turn 18, if you say, it is my sincere religious belief that if I handle poisonous snakes, because I am pure, I will not be bitten, then the federal government says, go for it. Okay? But when you're 17, you can't. Okay? So polygamy is also something where they're trying to protect 13-year-old, 11-year-old girls at that time. So we see that with polygamy. But there's also the issue of the use of illegal drugs. And this is from 1991, I believe, Oregon versus Smith. So Smith, how many of you know what the Native American Church is? Okay, founded by Quanah Parker. Quanah Parker, the last Manatee. Before Manatees were on reservations by the U.S. government, was injured in a battle. His leg was injured, and the healer, the shaman, the medicine man, while he was setting his leg or was fixing his leg, gave him peyote to smoke. Why would you do that? Yes. Right? Put you somewhere else, well, I do like things to make you not in pain, I'm going to try to fill that up, right? It's probably the reason why any drugs get used anyway, right? It's really funny. All right. So, he uses peyote, and he sees a vision of Jesus Christ, and a vision of what the Native American church should be. And he says, hey, look, I'm going to found the Native American church, and we're going to use peyote in vision quests in order to speak to God, right? It is a tenet of the church. So Smith is a member of the Native American church. Uses peyote in a religious ceremony or for his own personal religious beliefs. But he also works for the state as a drug counselor. And when they drug test him, he tests positive for peyote as a item. The state of Oregon Supreme Court says you can't do that, that's religious liberty. Oregon appeals, so that's a state Supreme Court. Oregon appeals from there to the U.S. Supreme Court. And Justice Rehnquist writes that the drug traffic problem in the United States is such an overwhelming national security problem that the use of illegal drugs is going to overrun religious freedom. So, Congress passed a law called RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And part of that, the Supreme Court said, you can't tell us what it says, and they overturned it. Other states have just passed religious freedom protection, such as Oregon, to do that. But RFRA comes back later, and Hobby Lobby, if we will talk about some rights, because they could be all of them. The city of Hialeah case has to do with a church that practice animal sacrifice, okay, or ritualistic killing of animals, and they outlawed that practice. And the Supreme Court said, hey, look, you can do that. It's just like the way that you put your animals for the purposes of kosher butchering or halal or keeping halal, and as long as there is not animal cruelty, then that's religious freedom. Okay. So that's the religion. We'll come back. But freedom of speech and press, this is actually a place where the United States does tremendously well. And I would also say that in terms of the accommodationist policies and the freedom of religion that's under the first part of the First Amendment, we've also done a really pretty good job of that. And it's one of the reasons why there are so many different religious denominations in the United States as compared to other places. Because government has stayed out of it. Okay. But in terms of speech and press, we're some of the freest, actually top three, right? In terms of freedom of speech and press. We don't, you guys did our democracy meeting earlier, you saw that we are not top three in a lot of other areas, but this is the place we will do well. Okay. It doesn't mean that there are no limits, right? But it's a new concept that is, not, and cannot be abridged. Okay. So, Noam Chomsky says, and first of all, I want you to think of someone, whether they are in the public sphere, think of someone in the public sphere who you absolutely despise. Okay. And Noam Chomsky says, if we don't believe in freedom of expression for people we despise, then we don't believe in freedom of expression. And I want you guys to think about that when people are saying incredibly difficult things for you. Okay. So this is an awesome picture that I'm showing you right there, but not under our standards. And that's the first test for ozone. So there are limits on the kind of material that we can put out, all right? If it is obscene, it is not protected by the First Amendment. That's a limit, okay? But it's only obscene if the average person applying contemporary community standards finds the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient's interest. What's prurient mean? Sure, but mainly it's perverse sexual, and those are together. You'll notice it doesn't say anything about violence. Obscenity does not apply to violence at all. In the United States, it's the way that we see things that is different, okay? Other people may say, hey, that's not acceptable content, it's too violent. In the United States, we do not have any restrictions against content that is violent. We have restrictions against sexual content, okay? So my first question, community standards, you guys are my contemporary community. Do you find that this work appeals to the prurient sexual interest? Yeah, right? Yeah. Okay. But there are things that do. The work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct, again, sexual conduct, not any other kind of conduct, that is specifically defined and prohibited by law. Okay? So, for example, in the state of Oklahoma, it is illegal to have sex with who or what? Minors are a big one, right? Illegal to have sex with minors, okay? So, if in the state of Oklahoma, we're going to say, this is a prurient interest, and it is illegal in the state of Oklahoma, then it's going to be obscene. Unless the work, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Okay? And so, for example, the book Lolita. Right? What do you guys know about the book Lolita? You guys know this answer? What is the book Lolita about? Yeah.
I don't know what it's about, but I know it's very, or it was obscene.
Okay. Does anybody know what Lolita's subject is? Yeah.
It's about a young girl who gets in a sexual relationship with her stepfather.
Okay, so it is truly an older man having sex with a minor child. Right? Lolita. Okay. Lolita, however, is viewed as, taken as a whole, having serious literary value. Okay? Now, this is important because there's been a recent court case on this, and I want to make it clear. The first step is a community standard, right? We may view things as prurient in Norman, Oklahoma, that are not viewed as prurient in other places. Okay? That's possible. But that's a community standard. The work taken as a whole, lacking serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, that is not a community standard. That is a literary standard, or an artistic standard, or a political standard. It's broader. Okay? Broader. So Lolita, while the community may find it to be prurient, is viewed as having literary value. We have some pretty hard rules. The first is no prior restraint, which means no treatment, right? And so when we talk about the Pentagon Papers, for example, or that's New York Times versus US in 1971, New York Times said, hey, we got some stuff and we're going to print it. And they said, you can't do that. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, they can. Now, if there's national security stuff in there, you can prosecute them. But they can print it. Okay? So no prior restraint, censorship. Political speech is protected, symbolic speech is protected. Texas versus Johnson is burning a flag on the Texas state capitol steps, in protest of the United States, and the Reagan administration bombing the harbors of Nicaragua. And they said, that's protected. That's protected. Okay? Because you're not paying attention to what he's saying about mining the harbors. But when you see him burning the flag, you start paying attention. Right? We also see this in Tinker v. Des Moines, right? And Tinker v. Des Moines involves high school students who wear black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. Okay? And there's an important bit here in Tinker that I want to send with you, right? In Tinker, the Supreme Court specifically says neither teachers nor students check their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse door. Neither teachers nor students check their First Amendment rights. Hate speech is protected. That means you can say incredibly hateful things about a group of people, as long as they do not incite violence. Fighting words, incitement, that's different. And then there's a higher standard to prove libel or slander of a public person. You have to show malice, right? Okay. So for example, I could say, everybody knows that Tom Cruise likes to frolic with goats. Okay. This is something I just said. I don't have any malice. Right? It's probably untrue. Let's assume it's untrue. It's untrue. I don't know this, but if we'll say it's untrue, we can prove it's untrue. And that it hurt his reputation. People started calling him Goat Boy. Okay. He didn't get some parts because of it. Right? But I didn't say it with malice, and so it doesn't work. But if I were to say that about one of you in here, something that's untrue, okay? And your fellows called you Goat Girl or Goat Boy, right? And this hurt your reputation and caused you to go into depression, you would be sued Tampa, right? Okay. The right to peaceably assemble is also important because it also shows things. People can see things. The mass of people together, that sweat equity adds up to something. And it's also a privacy issue. I have the right to gather with my book club, okay? And tonight, to gather and crochet striped hats, okay? And you guys don't get to know who's in my book club. All right, I have the right to peaceably assemble. And you have the right to petition the government. Historically, this is much more important to Native American tribes, petitioning the government and that being read on the floor of Congress. Now it's read into the record.